I've invited a good friend of mine, Cordelia, so that we can talk about maximizing the impact of senior leader recruitment, as well as some other recruitment topics. Before I get started, Cordelia, can you introduce yourself just in case anyone doesn't know who you are?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Luke. Hi everyone. I'm Cordelia. I'm the founder of CMC Consulting and Hands-On Recruitment. We're boutique recruitment specialists within iGaming, emerging tech, technology, and also high-volume hospitality. And we also offer outsourced HR solutions within those verticals as well.
Nice. So today we are talking about senior leadership recruitment. I think one of my first questions is, if a CEO approached you and they said that they were struggling to hire good leaders, what was the first thing that you would investigate with that CEO? How would you delve into that a bit deeper?
Well, look, I think that the market is so saturated at the moment that the first thing I would probably look for is the reputation of the business. I think at the moment, reputation is really everything. And that can mean that you either can attract great talent or you really can't. So I'd want to see, in the market what the reputation of that company is. And I'd also want to sit down and kind of sit with them and chat honestly. You say that you have challenges with recruitment. What do those challenges entail? Is it that, you're looking to offer 50K and the role is actually 120? Okay, well, straight away, that's a salary problem. Or is it that, you want everybody in the office, but actually that's not competitive for the role that you are looking to recruit for? Or are you looking to recruit in an office in a location that is just not attractive for candidates at that level? I think there are many different hiring challenges when it comes to senior leaders, but I think it's important to consider that it normally isn't just one, it's normally a combination of at least a few things. And also, to look internally, because sometimes companies are lucky that they have good reputations externally, but internally, we will have worked with businesses like this. We know that it's a little bit chaotic inside. So it's also about trying to attract the right people. When you're looking at hiring senior leaders, are you looking for problem solvers? Are you looking for someone to come in, make big changes, and then maybe they transition out? I think there are many different types of senior leadership like roles. And it's important to understand if you're looking for this, building from the ground up, a problem solver or a fixer.
Yeah. I think even when I go in and I'm working with CEOs as well, and they're talking about challenges in regards to senior leaders, I think we are touching on some of the things that even I would touch on, which is what specifically are you needing? What specifically are you looking for? And I think sometimes it's they might have loads of ideas and they say they're looking for an innovative person, when actually if you've already got all those ideas, you need an implementer, not
Yes.
another ideas person, because the business is just going to be full of ideas and no execution. And then I also see a lot of CEOs are very conscious about how many direct reports they have, so they're almost trying to combine roles together so that they're looking for this wonderful unicorn that doesn't exist, because actually when you split the job description out into what it should be, it's two senior roles and not one. And I mean, I'm not saying the unicorns don't exist, but they're a lot harder to find than two specific entities. So I think you touched on something really good there, which is kind of investigating what's going on and what really are they looking for. Because I think sometimes a job description doesn't always represent what a CEO is
Totally.
truly looking for. No, it makes
Yeah, and
sense.
I think as well, when you look at a job description, unless a business has been really focused on building that job description for that specific role, I know, and when I worked internally, we often use the same job description for the same role 3 or 4 years later. Yeah, okay, the number of reports is the same, the actual structure of the role is the same, but maybe the role's actually really changed and it's moved from fighting fires to actually building something new, and that's not reflected in the job description. So I think it's also up to recruitment teams to make sure that that information is really up to date, but also that they're able to discuss honestly with the candidate that, if this is going to be an extremely challenging role, that that's also translated to the people applying, rather than you're going to come in, everything's set up, ready to go, and then on day one you come in and you're like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah. I even see a lot of organizations these days is they're getting a little bit lazy with job descriptions and almost using AI to pull out job descriptions from, even if they're looking at similar organizations. even if I'm thinking about iGaming, I'm typically working with quite a lot of affiliates, and the
Yes.
sizes of the affiliates are completely different. So if you're basically asking AI to pull a job description from a very large affiliate organization for a senior role and then position it in your affiliates, which is a lot smaller, it doesn't represent the organization. It's like what you're saying as well from a reputation point of view. If I'm a candidate, what makes this role different than the other role? Because on paper they look exactly the same. Where there's actually reputation, the organization, what the challenges would be when I got in. That's all what would get a senior leader very excited and almost
Yes.
want them to apply.
When it comes to like I think one of the real problems that I see is that people are becoming way too dependent on it. It's like there's no common sense anymore. It's like, but we'll just use what Claude or ChatGPT is saying as like gospel. And that's actually really frightening. Like we had a client, I need to not be too specific so people can't work out who it is, but we had a client come to us with a job description from their competitor and said, "We want to recruit exactly this job, but it's not them, it's us." And it was like, "But your business is a quarter of the size. So
Yeah.
everything in the job description is different. Yes, you want to hire people from those competitors, but that job description does not fit who you are as a business. So of course we can't use that because the number of reports is not true. The number of areas of responsibility in a business 4 times larger is going to be totally different than a much smaller company that's earlier on in their kind of growth phase." And I think that if people aren't really careful, they are going to fall into the trap of this just total dependence on AI. And that is actually going to set businesses back. And I think that the best way to use AI is that it's a tool for us to develop what we know, and it's to help make manual tasks quicker. For me, I will never, and I'll die on this cross, I will never use AI to find candidates for me, to source for me. You know, that's what I'm paid client by clients for, to find those candidates myself. And I am 100% sure that many candidates that we've got offers for that have gone on to join businesses this year, if they had gone through an AI funnel, they wouldn't have passed the AI test because perfectly imperfect is what we look for. And I think the thing is that AI often looks for too much of a match that doesn't actually exist or reflect who that business is.
Yeah, very much so. I'm completely aligned with that. I'm a big fan of AI, but I think AI usage should be about taking away the tasks that a robot can do and allowing you to be more human in those elements that require that human intervention. And I
Totally.
know we're talking about recruitment in general from an AI perspective, but when we're talking about senior leaders specifically, is that actual human interaction is going to be vital because you're not going to get a sense of the business. You're not going to get a sense of the people that you're going to be working with or working for from an AI model handling most of the recruitment process. So I'm definitely aligned with you on that one. Other than what you've just mentioned, what do you think is the biggest mistake that organizations tend to make when they're recruiting senior leaders specifically, or common mistakes?
I think the most common mistakes for larger businesses is trying to poach candidates from like what they view as like A-star competitors or other businesses. I think the challenge is that if you recruit these like super high profile people, they also come with high demands, high expectations. And I think that often the people that are most able to succeed are the ones that it's a bit of a challenge for them in the new role. They hit 7 out of the 10 things and they really want to achieve more and push on more and be more successful. I think that sometimes when, yeah, businesses try to kind of overachieve by taking these like real like superstars, they're just not able to give them what they need. And they end up, 6 months to a year deciding that they're going to move on, which is, a huge disappointment for the new business, but also probably for the employee too, because they feel like they haven't really been fulfilled in the way that they thought they might.
Yeah. I think I'm aligned with that in a slightly different direction. One of the things that I see is almost job title. I think is when you advertise for a director of product externally, you're advertising for someone who's almost 50% strategic and 50% operational. When you're looking at the actual functionality of the role, they want more of a head of product who is much more, a little bit less strategic, but a little bit more operational. And I think sometimes those titles make them go to market almost looking for the wrong profile of the role that they're doing. And I
Totally.
understand in organizations we have to give people job titles, but almost looking as does the job title represent exactly what we're looking for? And I
Yeah.
think one of the other things that you touched on as well is potential. I almost think, and I'm being a little bit contrary here, but I almost think is if I'm looking for a head of marketing and I'm advertising for a head of marketing and I'm only interviewing head of marketing, then for me, I'm being contrary. But why would a head of marketing in another business want to work for me? What is inspiring them to leave? Is it more money? Is it the fact that they haven't got job opportunity to progress, or is there something else going on? But if they haven't got opportunities for progression in their current business, then that means if I hire them in my business is within 6 months, 12 months, they're going to want progression. Otherwise, why else would they have moved? So I almost think is in those kind of situations, are we looking at the senior marketing manager, some organization that's got all that potential to be ahead of? Like what you're saying is they're going to find it a challenge, and it's almost like they haven't got the opportunity to step into a head of role because there's a head of that's not going to move, but they definitely are capable of a head of role.
Yes,
That's more exciting because that's why somebody would want to leave from
for sure.
a senior manager into a head of role. But head of to head of, it's almost like you're either jumping for more salary, in which case in 12 months' time, you're going to ask me for more salary. You're jumping because you're not getting progression, in which means in 12 months' time, you're going to ask for progression and I'm back to square one again. Or there's something wrong with your performance, in which case in 12 months' time, I'm going to have a problem with your performance. So, and I am being contrary because I'm sweeping statement. I believe there are some good heads of out there
Of
that just
course.
the culture fits not right, and therefore they will be amazing in another role. But I think one of the common mistakes I see is them just recruiting leaders, not opening themselves up to the potential of growth into that role and what that means.
Yeah, and I think, look, one of the things that we're also seeing in the market, definitely, within CMC consulting and like me personally too, is clients want more for less. So they are happy to undercut candidates at offer stage. I mean, we had a CEO role in Malta being advertised with us, and the client wanted to pay 60,000 and had no idea why we couldn't find anyone. It was like, that's not a
Wow.
CEO salary.
When
It's
yeah.
impossible. It's impossible to find somebody at that. I mean, I kind of was in the call trying to be polite, but I mean, it's laughable. You can't offer a salary at that level. So either the job description doesn't fit the role, in which case we need to look at the salary and bring it down and minimize the level of the role, or you need to double it or treble it, and then we can find the candidates for you. So I think it feels like at the moment in Malta that a lot of like mine and my team's role is actually on education and on saying to the clients, look, if you want this level of candidate, this is what you're going to have to pay. And if you don't want to pay that, yes, we can look at other European countries, no problem. Or we can look at, other options. Maybe you look at somebody part-time. There are lots of other ways that businesses can do it. But yeah, I think that that's the challenge we have at the moment. And I mean, I've mentioned this on a couple of other discussions as well. We are seeing everywhere that clients are undercutting the salary expectations. So a candidate all the way through the process is looking for 80K. They're probably on 72, 68, and they're looking for 80, which is a fair uplift considering their experience. The client loves them all the way through. And then at offer stage, oh, we're going to offer them 70. But they were introduced to 80. Well, we know that they'll probably take 70. And for me, it's a little bit disappointing that we're in this kind of like hard sales with great candidates, because the market is flooded with fantastic candidates at the moment due to a lot of redundancies, business structures changing. And it feels a little bit like a lot of companies are taking advantage of that. And that's something which I don't particularly like to see, because I know the market rate and I know the value of a candidate. And just because you can get somebody cheaper, I don't think it means that you really should.
Yeah, and I'm totally aligned with that. I think it almost sets the expectations of what you expect to happen within the first 12 months when you do
Yeah,
something like that.
totally.
Doesn't mean necessarily you miss out on the candidate. You might get them for the 70 in your example, but in 6, 10 months' time, especially if they're an outperformer or an overachiever, and then they're very marketable, and somebody's going to come along and offer them a lot more than 80, never mind 70. So it's almost like for me, it goes back to that kind of business mentality of what's the return on investment. And you can even be clear when somebody comes in and you're setting the expectations from day one. You can even be very clear about what you expect for that 80,000. And if they're an overachiever or top performer, they're going to work their butt off in order to do that, and that's perfectly fine. So I think there's a disconnect between treating people as the leaders that you're hiring them to be, in that
Totally.
initial stages. If I mean, this might be something that touches a little bit on your business model a little bit as well, which is if a senior leader hire fails, do you think it's usually because it was the wrong hire, or do you think it's something that where the organization has failed to help them succeed?
I think, and this isn't just answering kind of diplomatically, it's really it's really what I think. I think it's a combination of the two. I think, look, sometimes businesses do just hire the wrong people, but I think also you can very easily set somebody up to fail if they're not properly, put through an induction, that, they understand the layout of the business, the challenges. I mean, where do you see the business going in 30, 60, 90 days? It's a really basic question. But if the business isn't able to answer that throughout an interview process, I would be nervous then about joining. They need to have a plan, not just for me or for you, but for the business in its entirety. And, a lot of the companies that we partner with are quite early on in their growth journey, and they think they know where they're going to go. And often they don't really know. And that's part of the excitement, that sometimes you join a startup and then in 6 months' time it's scaled and, your role then changes. But I think it's really important that that core is there, because without that, it's almost like you're just stabbing in the dark.
Yeah, and I think those are the kind of conversations that you would be expecting to have in a senior level recruitment
Yes.
process anyway. And you're right, is I would be nervous if those answers couldn't be thing. And I think one of the things I noticed from the other side is that organizations are, especially the dynamic organizations that we typically work with, they're reluctant to say things because they're constantly putting the caveat of things will change. We're too dynamic, is we can't really say. And I've worked in even when I worked at eBay, is like we did 3-year planning, 3-year forecasting, 3-year budget planning, 3-year project initiatives, and we worked on a 3-year cycle. That doesn't mean that on year two, I'm definitely going to do what I said last year I was going to do on year two. It just means that I can have that conversation as of today, but then in 6 months' time, that conversation could look differently. But I should be able to still have that conversation based on the knowledge I have today, especially in a senior leadership interview
Yeah,
process.
absolutely.
I think I'm aligned with you where it's a bit of both, and I think I have to be honest with this. Is I renown myself on being a great hirer. I can spot talent. I've always said that it's pretty good. But I even remember one example when I worked in London, not at eBay, thankfully, where I was certain this candidate was like amazing, and I brought him in. And I even think for the first 2 months, I was like, no, everyone's giving me feedback going, this guy's no. And I'm like, no, we just need to give him the opportunity. I'll invest in it. And then I think before the probation was up at 6 months, I had to kind of concede as I made the wrong hire. But everything during the whole process was correct. And for me, on paper and in process, he was the right hire. And I also did all the support. So I do think sometimes it's a bit out of our control. I get asked a lot of times, you might laugh at this, for interview training or how to hire talent. We even do a how to hire talent course for the perfect model. And I'm just like, there's no way in the world any model can't guarantee 100% success, because
No.
people are people. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think it's a combination of both: is hire the right people and then also empower them to succeed. So
Yeah. And I think as well, just like you said, people are people, and human nature means that maybe this person was the best person at the time of the interview process, but maybe they've got, huge challenges in their personal life. Maybe there are things going on elsewhere that means that they're not able to focus properly. And I think that it's very easy for any one of us in like a leadership role to look and say, well, work is work and work life balance. And, there are constant debates. Does work life balance exist? Can it exist? Should it exist? Do we want it to exist? All of this. but actually sometimes it's the right person, but the wrong time. You know, it's the same as in a relationship. Sometimes you meet somebody and they are perfect for you and you're perfect for them, but it's just not the right time. And I think that sometimes that's the same in work, that you may have so many other things going on, other priorities that you're not able to give work your proper focus. And maybe at that point, that's when the business decides, you know what, you're not actually what we need now. But if we'd hired you 2 years ago, or if we were to hire you in 3 years in the future, then it would actually work out very differently.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Given what we are talking about is, do you think any senior leaders who are hiring people, so the people on the other side of the table, as it was, do you think there's some capabilities that they lack currently in order to spot the right talent? You know, because interviewing and hiring process is a skill in itself. So do
Yes.
you think we're missing something on the other side, the person on the other side of the table asking the questions?
I think it seems to me, and I'm not sure if you see this as well, when training, people within businesses, that everyone is in such a rush at the moment. It's like, the CEO and the senior leadership team have sat down and they've decided we need this role, but we need it in 3 weeks' time, in a month's time. And then, we're working on the role. We can't consider candidates on 2 months' notice because it's too slow. So then automatically the pool is like, trim down 3 months, 6 months, forget it. They want somebody a month's notice and they don't want them to relocate from anywhere. They already have to be in Malta, for example. So the pool is getting smaller and smaller. And then, oh no, but we only want them to have worked for a company like this or like this. Okay. So the pool is smaller again. And then, you're missing out on great people that could be a fantastic fit, that maybe they left Malta 4 years ago. Him and his wife, they moved to the UK, but they're actually keen to move back, but they need a little bit longer than 4 weeks. It feels like there's this knee jerk reaction at the moment, that it's like, if a business feels like it needs to be turned around, it's like, oh, well, we'll just hire new people and we need to get them in as soon as possible. And you know as well as I do that rushing recruitment processes, I mean, in the same way that taking too long is not good either, there's a happy medium, but rushing things means that you often don't see the red flags. And it's very easy for somebody to appear the perfect candidate in a one-stage process and a presentation that they haven't even had to present, they've just emailed in, rather than 3 stages, meeting different stakeholders, maybe meeting somebody face to face, going out, for a drink, a coffee, whatever it is, and kind of getting to know them on more of a personal level, and also being able to gather those more like personal references. If things are too rushed, I feel like that's often where mistakes are made. And it's like, oh, if we had just waited a little bit longer, or if we had just looked into things a little bit more, then maybe we would have chosen a more suitable applicant.
Yeah. I think I totally agree with what you're saying as well, about the rushing of the process, and also the how long a process can be. It's almost trying to find the middle ground, and I like what you're saying, which is having those. I mean, we're talking about senior leaders, so going out for a drink, whether it's a coffee or a glass of wine, and
Yes.
having more of a social conversation is a perfectly acceptable kind of process to do to gather more information and get an understanding of them. When I'm coaching CEOs, typically as well, I'm also working on them understanding that who they build rapport with in an interview might not be who they want, because we will find it easier to build rapport with people who are similar to us.
Of
But if
course.
I'm a idea CEO and an innovative CEO, I don't want to. I mean, if I'm having a good interview, an hour-long interview, and we're bouncing ideas off each other and it's going great, I might feel, oh my God, this candidate's amazing. But you don't need another ideas person. You are an ideas person. The person, you still need a rapport, but it's almost like, I want somebody who can operationally deliver. I want somebody who's going to spot risks and identify risks. I'm almost looking for that direct report that might be a little bit opposite than me, because
Yes.
I can fill all this bit. It's this bit that's missing. But when I'm interviewing and that rapport is the real vibe, that's probably with somebody who's very similar to me. So I'm just going to hire a mini me, and then
Yes.
you've got problems in yourself. So I think sometimes as well, working with CEOs, it's about them understanding is, n- well, what we said earlier, what specifically are you looking for? Let's target that. But then remember that in the interview process is, if you're not looking for an innovator and you're wanting somebody who can literally lead on execution and delivery, then that conversation should be more about leading on execution. It shouldn't
Yes.
be more about those ideas and innovations, because then you're bringing in a great person who you've got great rapport in, but you're going to put them in a role where they're going to be ineffective. So I think that also aligns with everything you're saying about when we talk about senior leaders. other than salary, which I'm going to smile at because salaries obviously we don't work for nothing, but other than salary, what do you think impacts the candidate's decision to say yes or say no?
I think that I think depending on how senior the leadership role is, so if we take CEO out, because, there's nowhere else you can really go in the business, right? If we're looking at, I don't know, a director of marketing, for example, that could maybe transition into something more senior, like somewhere where there are a couple of levels. I think really people want to see like progression opportunities, their own career development. I think autonomy and flexibility are so undervalued, but they are so appreciated by candidates. I think for businesses to become more performance focused as opposed to, output focused as opposed to like hours worked, I think that those businesses seem to be the ones where candidates are really keen and really excited to join.
No, I agree, and obviously, I'm going to mention what you mentioned, which is this kind of growth mindset as well. Is that people typically, whether they want vertical progression or not, everyone wants growth, and I think horizontal growth is becoming a lot more needed and required and asked for than ever before. And I think as more old school leaders, we were always taught to develop the people who wanted vertical progression. That was where our focus was. But there's a lot more people wanting that horizontal remit. And when we're talking about C level as well, you mentioned it is some people don't want to be a CEO. So it's like they might get a chief marketing officer's job, but they don't have any aspirations to be CEO. I don't want that job. So, but I still want growth and development. So what are you going to do for me? So how are you investing me? So I think these kind of things become much more important. I mean, salary is for me is the base. We don't do it for nothing. But after salary is what am I personally getting that's helping me as an individual, and have
Yeah,
more
yeah,
impact.
and I think as well, traditionally progression was viewed as you would go from like an SEO expert, let's say, and then the next step up would be to a manager, to be managing people. And actually some very good technical people don't want to manage people. So I don't know what happened in the kind of corporate world to then assume that the next step up is always managing people. Some people are not natural leaders, and I think that we shouldn't be pushing people to manage people just because it's seen as like, oh, well, that's the next step up. I think that businesses where people can grow and develop vertically and horizontally without having to take human responsibilities, that's probably a much healthier way to be, because you can be growing all of the time, but actually not wanting to have that human responsibility. And that's also fine.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I even work with an organization here in Malta where there's actually progression, vertical progression, but from that specialist mentality. So you
Yes.
can go into more senior specialist roles in the same discipline and never end up with people management. So I think and that's when you actually start to see still people still want horizontal. They don't want the extra responsibility. Work-life balance comes back in there. But I think having this kind of spectrum of if you want to stay an individual contributor as a senior specialist, there's progression or there's
Yes.
horizontal. And if you actually want to stay in your discipline, there's management progression or there's horizontal progression. And having this whole spectrum, I think I even refer to it as one thing, that the career ladder is dead, but the jungle gym is alive, because I think it
Yeah.
is literally, we
Yeah.
could end up anywhere as long as we're getting grown and developed. So I think that's really, really kind of thingy. I don't know how often you have this happen. I hope it's very rarely, but is there ever an occasion where you would see a strong candidate dropping out of the process? And if so, if that's ever happened, what are the kind of typical reasons that would prompt a senior leader who's very strong, very good for that role, that would just say, "This isn't for me"?
Yeah, so I think, look, this year has been a very interesting year recruitment wise. And we've seen, yeah, a number of candidates just before offer stage drop out, within senior leadership roles. I think it's a combination of things. I think the market is changing a lot at the moment. And it feels like, and my advice has really been kind of up into this point, what are we like, the start of July, that if you're not very unhappy where you are, I wouldn't advise going for a new role. And that the reason that I say that is, salaries being really the front and foremost thing that all the clients are looking to pay. So the salary that you're looking for, you're most likely not going to get. the competitive element of the people that you will be going up against will be probably the strongest they've ever been, but previously we would have 2 candidates, 3 max for a final stage. You're now seeing between 7 to 10, sometimes between 3 agencies. And, that's a lot of stress for people going through that. And also, we know how small the market is. Confidentiality, of course, we keep, but it's very easy for clients to then, it ends up being their sister's brother's friend is in the recruitment team, and then suddenly the new company and the old company are aligned and they know that this person is going for, the new role. And I think that the problem is that, of course, we live in a free world. We're not stuck in any role. You can move to any job or any company you want. But unfortunately, sometimes it's seen as a kind of lack of trust. If then that person then doesn't get the role, they then stay in their old role, but the company knows that they've been actively recruiting
Yeah.
and, actively
Yeah.
looking for a new role.
Yeah, very much so. I also, when I'm working with people who are that is, I agree with you. You need to make sure that you are ready to move before you move, because I almost think is once you start even like trying it out and looking around and you even have one stage interview, psychologically you're already detracting from your current job. It's very hard to go back into a passionate, energetic your current job if you've already started a process somewhere else, even if it was just speculative. So I'm the same as you. I urge people to make sure that they're very clear that this is definitely the right step before they start the process, because you're already kind of switching off from your current role. And I'm not saying people would start underperforming, but you might drop down from being an overachiever to just a steady Eddie. So nobody's really noticing much, but psychologically you're out of the business. So to make sure it's the right
Yeah.
decision.
And I think as well, entering recruitment processes, it takes a toll. It's tiring, it's stressful, it's emotionally charged. Maybe the role that you really want, you end up not getting, you don't really get the proper feedback because the client, doesn't have specific feedback. It's just that you weren't the best person for the role. So I think it's also got to be the right time. I think that when you're entering into any kind of recruitment processes, you want to try and be the happiest version of you that you can be, that you're settled, that you're feeling healthy and strong and good, and all of those kind of the foundation blocks, right? Because if you're not able to portray yourself in a really positive way, it's hard then for that business to see you at your best.
No, I agree completely. Yeah, it makes sense. Um, Obviously, CMC works in partnership with the organization. So I think, obviously there's different levels of people who assist with the recruitment, but I truly believe anyone that works in true partnership and understands the business and understands the role and almost challenges to gather that investigatory stuff is definitely a partner of choice. Do you see that there will be any changes to either the recruitment process using third party suppliers like CMC, or even internally over the next like 18 months that people should be aware of? Are you seeing any kind of dramatic changes coming up?
I mean, look, it's no news to kind of, say that a lot of businesses are shedding their recruitment teams at the moment. A lot of companies are focusing on either using outsourced solutions, or due to the company changing size, they don't need to have the same number of people within those teams. And I mean, if we look on LinkedIn, the market everywhere, not in Malta, in the UK, everywhere, is flooded with fantastic TA people who are looking for
Yes.
work. And I think that it's a challenging time to be looking because of the level and the caliber of candidates. I mean, I was looking and seeing some phenomenal people that I've known over the years that are now looking for new roles. And, when you add them together and they're in the pool all going for the same interviews, I mean, that's a scary space to be in. But lucky for the clients because they're able to then pick and choose, but it's difficult and scary. And I actually wrote a piece for IGB affiliate that I think it'll be released, I think next week, around like redundancy and how it's everywhere at the moment. And that, most people in the gaming industry will go through it once, twice, maybe even 3 times in their career. And that
Yes.
it's really downplayed the emotional impact that it has on you. You know, I've been through it myself, that you lose your entire identity and you feel like a sad, miserable loser at home when everybody else is at work. And it's not true at all. And we shouldn't judge ourselves on who we are at work, because we are so much more than that. But it is so difficult in that moment to then go and meet your friends and everyone's talking about work and you're like, well, I've been at home watching Netflix, or, you know, I was playing squash for 3 hours today, and it's like, oh, how fun, that must have been great. And it's like all I all I'm consumed about is trying to get the next job, where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. And I think it's that emotional part that is really difficult for people to communicate. And I think that we all need to become better at checking in on our friends who are going through this, because it is everywhere at the moment. It's an epidemic of redundancies, we can say. And sometimes just reaching out to someone and saying, look, I know it's a shitty time, but like, how are you doing? Do you want to go for a coffee, a walk, a glass of wine, whatever it is? Because actually, that's really what that person needs. It's not to be sitting at home applying for the 300th job in the same day, not getting any updates and being kind of stuck in this loop of like applying, not hearing back, and then feeling despondent. So that then when you get into a recruitment process, you're so anxious about it that you can't perform in the way that you would like to, because you're so stressed about what happens if you don't get the job. And it becomes this perpetuating cycle.
Very much so. And that's even something I was going to say, which is, I think in the redundancy, I've been through it twice in my career as well, which is it almost makes you doubt your own capabilities.
A
And
hundred
then you're
percent.
literally on the market trying to sell those capabilities that you're almost in the position of doubting. And I think I don't know if organizations can do more in a redundancy process, but there does need to be something that fills that middle bit, which is almost like, how do we get people to reflect on what they are capable of, regain that confidence, ready to enter the job market and position themselves as the experts and as the leaders that they are. And you're right, is even checking in on friends that are doing the same thing is really important. I've got one final question for you before you go, which is just an interesting thing to end on, is if you could give yourself, your younger self, some professional advice, looking back, and professional I'm talking about. So if you could go back and give your younger self some professional advice, what advice would you give yourself?
That is such a good question. I think the advice that I would give to myself is to not give my whole self at work. I think I really fell into the trap when I was a people leader of pretty big teams, of sharing my whole life to help build rapport with my team. And what I really painfully realized is that the more senior you get, the more lonely you are, and the more lonely you should be at work, because you have less people to chat to, and you've got to then also be a particular level and be perceived in a certain way. It's very different to when you're a junior employee, as you continue to kind of, you know, grow and develop. And that actually people liking you is important at work, but people respecting you is probably more important. And I think that when I was younger, I wanted everybody to like me and was so obsessed with that, that I probably made some bad calls because I didn't want to be seen as the bad guy, which I think when it came to work decisions probably hurt me a little bit. And I think if I'm really honest, and I probably haven't reflected on this before, so thank you. I think it probably held me back a little bit to get to the kind of head of level, because people saw that the team liked me, but on the respect side, that was something that needed to be earned more. And you know, Jenny was my mentor when we were at Katina. We worked very, very closely together, and she gave me a lot of advice about this when I had joined. And it was hard to take it on board because, you know, I wanted my team to like me and we would go out together and have drinks together and have fun together. But actually, you have to have a little bit of it. And for every leader, it's different, but you need to have more of a separation. And I realized probably a little bit too late in that part of the journey, because it's then very difficult to try and take it back. you can't go from giving all of that and then suddenly you change. So then when I moved then to the next business, I tried to keep more of a professional distance, still be friendly and nice and friendly and really interested in what the team were doing and what they were up to, but sharing much less of my whole self. They were able to share whatever they wanted to with me, but that there was a bit more of that distance, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. It's really good advice as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time, Cordelia. It's been a delight, as it always is. But I think we had some really juicy conversations. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.